Welcome everyone to Live from Reference Bar on Tuesday, 26th of May. I'm keeping the intro super short tonight as we try and take advantage of every second we've got with tonight's guests. We really could have had a part one and part two with all the questions that I had to condense down this earlier yesterday. As always though, please hit subscribe in the bottom right hand corner of your YouTube screen. So where you see that little Barnsley shirts on a washing line logo, hit subscribe. If you're on Facebook and Twitter, head over to YouTube after this and do exactly the same. So coming on tonight's our 15th session, believe it or not, and we're blessed to be joined by a former Red with over 200 games for Barnsley, scored over 35 goals, a star player in that Premier League season, has FA Cup wins over Man United and Spurs, and earned himself 18 caps for Wales as a Barnsley player, and played in that goal-scoring frenzy of a season that saw us lose agonisingly to Ipswich at Wembley, which we'll no doubt ask him about towards the end. Good evening, Darren Barnard.
Hello there, all right.
Look, first question, other than obviously asking how you are, did you ever score a bad goal in a Red shirt?
The second goal in the Premier League season against Everton, I think, was from about 3 inches out.
Right.
But obviously scoring in the Premier League is a great experience as well. So, in answer to your question, probably. But I seem to remember 3 or 4 goals that I scored.
And are you keeping well during lockdown and furlough and everything that's going on?
Yes, I've been furloughed. So I've currently been at home for the last sort of 10, 12 weeks with the kids and everything like that. So homeschooling is interesting, a newfound respect for teachers. But no, it is what it is. You have to abide by the laws and just get on with things, really.
And as I alluded to earlier, we've got a mountain of questions to get through, more than we've had for any interview, which I think just shows how eventful your time at Barnsley was. Before we take a look at your career and pick out the highlights, with us looking like we might be playing behind closed doors soon, how do you think you would have fared as a player in that behind closed doors scenario?
I think I maybe would have struggled a little bit, to be honest, because you'd like to feed off of the crowd, and you do things and people appreciate it. It would feel like a training game to me, which sometimes means the pressure's off in the game itself. But I think to play with no atmosphere and no ground, it wouldn't feel like a proper game to me. So I would probably struggle a little bit, to be honest.
And thinking back to that Premier League squad that we had, how do you think they'd have fared going behind closed doors in that kind of David versus Goliath scenario?
Again, it's you think of some of the games that we played that year. Again, even the games we lost a few games, but some of the games we won. You think of Anfield away. Again, although we were under pressure for most of the game, we fed off the crowd, and you feed off each other. And I think every game at Barnsley in the Premier League season was a special game, and the crowd were the 12th man in a lot of those games, and the atmosphere was fantastic. And I think from a footballer's point of view, you want that sort of atmosphere and experience in each game. So to not have it would just feel like you're going through the motions a little bit, for me personally.
Yeah, I think watching the German league this weekend, it was a little bit like that. Look, icebreakers out of the way, which means we go back and find an 18-year-old Wokingham Town player being signed by Chelsea for a reported £100,000. How did that feel at the time, playing for Wokingham and signing for such a big club like Chelsea?
It was surreal, to be honest. A little bit of background, I didn't get offered an apprenticeship. I was at Tottenham as a 16-year-old, so I didn't get offered a full apprenticeship. So I ended up going back to my local club, but I was playing in the men's team. So whilst I was earning 60 quid a week, training once a week and playing twice a week, guys of my age were doing a YTS for £29.50. So I was earning twice as much, not cleaning boots, not having to do all the dirty stuff. So from that perspective, it was great. But then to move to Chelsea, I moved the same week as Dennis Wise and Andy Townsend. So there was no reports of me moving to the club at all. It was all about Dennis Wise being the big player from Wimbledon, and obviously won the FA Cup a couple of years before. I was just a young lad brought in, and from my perspective, 1 minute I was training with a few guys who I knew quite well. The next minute I'm standing next to Kerry Dixon, who obviously growing up in the 80s, you knew what a formidable goal scorer he was. Steve Clark was there, Gordon Jury, Dennis Wise. It was just an absolute surreal moment for an 18-year-old boy.
And I'm guessing in terms of Wokingham Town, that's probably the biggest fee they've ever received for a player, right?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
It was 100 grand. We had a pre-season friendly against Chelsea as well. I paid half for both teams. And I think that probably raised about 50 grand as well. So at the time in 1990, today it's peanuts. But in 1990, 150 grand for a club of Wokingham stature would have probably kept them going for a couple of years easily.
So you must be close to getting a statue outside the ground.
Ground's not there anymore. It's a housing estate.
Oh no!
Yeah, about 10 years later, they built on it, and the ground was a great little ground. On a Friday night, we used to go down there, and there was whippet racing around the pitch. It was fantastic. It really was, and a great set of people there. Mum and Dad are still very, very close friends with the old manager who was there as well. So it was great to be a part of it.
And your Chelsea debut came against West Ham when you came off the bench. Do you remember it well? And how did you find that step up from Wokingham Town to Chelsea's first team?
It'd been a while. I've been at Chelsea for about 18 months. So I've been itching to get into the first team squad. I felt I was close enough, probably 6 months earlier, but didn't get an opportunity. In those days as well, don't forget. So you were limited on the number of players that you could pick. And Chelsea had quite a big squad at the time, but to make that debut was fantastic. I think I came on for Vinnie Jones.
That was going to be my next question. Was if Wikipedia tells the truth, then it was Vinnie Jones that came off, and I was going to ask, what was it like being in a first team squad with Vinnie Jones?
Yeah, he's certainly a character. Old bullet tooth Tony. He was larger than life. He walked in the first day, turned the speakers on the record player right up to full volume. If you walk around the corner, you thought he was 12'6", but he was a deceptively good footballer. To be fair to him, he doesn't get enough credit for his football ability. He's got this hard man image, but he could play. He could play. Obviously, he wouldn't have played for Leeds and Chelsea and Wimbledon and the rest of the other clubs, Sheffield United, if he hadn't been a decent footballer.
Yeah, and one of the other big names that was around the Chelsea at the same time as you was Glenn Hoddle, who arrived from Swindon. When he arrived, it seemed like that's when you started getting less first team action. What was Glenn like, and did he explain to you why you were going to find opportunities limited?
No, is the simple answer. He came in initially. I played quite a few games for him. Playing against Sheffield Wednesday in the FA Cup. I then played in the semi-final against Luton. Came on a sub after 20 minutes at Wembley. So that was fantastic. It was the following season I didn't get a look in, and it all came down to a reserve team game against Wimbledon. I was playing centre midfield, and Peter Shreves was his right-hand man. And playing against Wimbledon, typical game against them, in midfield, the ball bypassed you the whole game, over your head. So I went in the dressing room, and myself and the other centre midfield player got slaughtered by Peter Shreves. And being sort of, although quite quiet initially, I felt I had to say something, and I thought he was out of order and said that we couldn't get hold of the ball because the ball was just flying in the air all the time. He dragged me off at half-time, and I never played for Chelsea's first team ever again. Glenn Hoddle was a manager, probably in my bottom two. As a coach, probably in my top three.
Wow.
He was great at coaching. He wasn't very good at managing, especially one-on-one situations. He couldn't explain your answer to your question. He couldn't explain why I wasn't good enough to get into his team. Don't get me wrong, there was good players at Chelsea at the time, but I'd done enough to get into the team, but he didn't see that his way.
You left Chelsea on a couple of seasons at Bristol City. I think that's where Joe Jordan realised how good you'd be as a left wing back. And then we get to the summer of '97, the Super Reds come calling, Premier League. How easy was it to sign for us that summer? And was that the first time we'd spoken to you?
Yes, it was. I came up on the Tuesday, met Danny, had a medical, and had a chat about coming up and seeing playing for the club. I went back to Bristol City on the Wednesday morning, and on the Wednesday afternoon, I signed a new 3-year contract with Bristol City. Because Barnsley have only had to have paid, I think, £150,000 for me. There was a clause put in for £750,000, and Barnsley came straight back that evening with that fee. So obviously they desperately wanted me, and I had second thoughts. I enjoyed my time at Bristol City. I loved the club. It was a great little club. But then I actually had second thoughts after I signed the contract, thinking, this could be my last chance to get back into the Premier League. So spoke to Barnsley that evening, and then went up on the Thursday morning and signed the contract with Barnsley with Bristol City's approval, because Barnsley met the minimum fee, and trained on the Friday for an hour. The only name that I could remember was Neil Redfearn's, and played on the Saturday against West Ham.
Oh God, I didn't realise it was that quick a turnaround.
Yeah.
But with understandably, we were favourites for relegation. Did Danny have to sell you his vision for keeping us up and the role that you'd play in achieving that?
Not really, no. It was a chance. I had three aims as a child: to play at the highest level possible, to try and play at Wembley Stadium, and to play against the best players in the world. And obviously playing against the best players in the world for Wales, achieved that. I played at Wembley twice, and I played at the highest level that I could possibly play at in terms of international football and obviously the Premier League. So he didn't have to sell it to me. I wanted to come because I wanted to pit my wits against the best players in the country. And, it was probably one of Danny's easiest negotiations, I think. I was obviously going to get paid a little bit more money than I was at Bristol City. So football in those days for me was a sport. It was about playing football. I didn't care about money. I just wanted to play football. So that was my goal and my aim. And I spent the next 2.5 months living out of Barnsley House Hotel, playing football for Barnsley Football Club.
And before you signed, did you realise just how much promotion to the Premier League meant to the town?
Not initially, but after probably 2 or 3 weeks, it was evident that the fans were so passionate. I'll be sitting in the hotel on a Thursday and a Friday night, and people will be coming up to me, and someone would say, "Yeah, that Barnard, are they laking?" Now, to a southerner, he hasn't got a clue what he's talking about. And I had to ask this guy about 5 times what he meant. And eventually he said, "Are you playing on Saturday?" So it was an eye-opener for me, but the passion came through with the fans. And we regularly get sort of 50, 60 people watching us train every day, in the days when you're allowed to watch the team train and things like this. So you didn't realise until you got there. And then after a couple of losses as well, we actually got taken down to a pit by Danny and Eric, saying this is what we could have been doing if we didn't pull our fingers out. So it was brought home to you pretty quickly, but it was the atmosphere there was always fantastic.
And obviously it was a very, very close squad with a great bond because of promotion and what the club had achieved the year before you joined. Did you feel at home straight away? And I know you said you didn't know anybody other than Redfearn in the early days, but who did you bond with in those first 2 or 3 weeks?
Yeah, it was just a case of just integrating yourself, really, because obviously, there wasn't cliques at the club, anything like that. There were some great characters, Darren Sheridan, one of the biggest characters you ever meet, great footballer, again, massively. People don't respect the footballing ability he had. He was a great little player. Redders made me feel welcome. Peter Shirtcliffe, we had a good old chat after a couple of weeks, because he'd actually watched me play 7 times for Bristol City without me realising. So they didn't buy me on a whim. They'd watched me for a couple of months and realised that I would fit into a system that they were trying to plan to play in the Premier League. You obviously had all your local boys as well. So you had your Nicky and Adi Moses and Lids who have come through the ranks with Eric, and they were all there. But everyone made me feel really welcome.
You mentioned there were no cliques, which kind of comes on to the next question. A lot was made about our recruitment that season, where we kind of went abroad for some of it. Did you sense any divide at all when you were there around this kind of?
There was a little bit, with the exception of maybe Aaron and Zazu. Some of the other boys didn't really get into the spirit and the life of being involved with Barnsley Football Club, without, well, if Georgie didn't do himself any favours by saying all the Barnsley women were ugly, not something you would ever say. But Georgie, Lars Lisa, and his Chris-Anne sort of kept themselves to themselves. Yovo was fine. Yovo was a great lad. Really enjoyed him. But those three sort of in particular didn't really mix too much with the rest of the squad.
And Eric Tinkler stayed around for 3/4 years, so I'm guessing he integrated quite well, and he played in the
Yeah,
Wembley game as well.
absolutely. Yeah, Eric was a good lad, a good player. I think he's coaching out in South Africa now, but yeah, he was a really good player. He sort of got involved with the boys, and he sort of embraced, you know, the players in terms of their mentality and what was needed to become a Premier League player and play in that Premier League. It's if you look at the team, it was a team of men, and we. I still feel to this day we were desperately unlucky not to stay up.
Yeah, completely agree. And look, you mentioned the West Ham game. You've not been there long. Pictures from that day still give Barnsley fans goosebumps. What was it like walking out to the pitch that day, making your Barnsley debut in Barnsley's Premier League debut?
I was nervous, and if the one thing anyone would ever tell you about me is I don't get nervous about playing football because it's you're in control of your own destiny. You know you can do it, but it's for me it was a sense of you don't want to let anyone down. Someone's paid £750,000 for you, and you want to go and prove that they've spent every penny on a decent player. And over the course of the years, I like to think that money was repaid. But on that day, the atmosphere was just incredible. Oakwell was absolutely packed to the rafters. We went ahead in the game, so we were buzzing. A great header. I think Eric Tinkler headed the ball back, or was it? It might have been Ariane Dezu actually, and then Redder's a great header from God knows from where because it was behind him. And then Frank Lampard ruined the day. I think he scored the winner, but it just went to show that we were on a crest of a wave and we were really buzzing and really at 1-0 up on a high, and then how quickly it can change in the Premier League. And just went to show that you have to be on your guard and you have to be on the ball for 90 minutes of a game, if not 95, 96 minutes of a game.
We then picked up the win at Crystal Palace. We got another win against Bolton, and then we lost 6 in a row, which is where like Premier League realization kind of set in. Did you start to wonder why you'd signed and what you were going to be in for the rest of the year, or was it still belief?
No, I think we were under no uncertain terms. You mentioned it earlier. We were favourites to go down, but we never got too despondent when we lost a game. Danny would sometimes come in on a Monday morning and have the hump, so you'd have to be careful and keep out of his way a little bit on a Monday. But once we got to Tuesday, that was it. Everything was forgotten about from the weekend. We were focusing on the next game. And the testament to the team, I think, that season was when we took a couple of Tonkins. You think Chelsea at home, we lost 6-0. When I should have put us 1-0 up I went through and tried to dink Ed De Hoyer with my right foot and kicked the ground, and it fell into his arms. I think he threw it out and they scored from it, and we ended up losing 6-0. We lost 6-0 to West Ham. We lost 7-0 to Man United. I'd have to check the records, but I think every game after we got tonked, we won, which just goes to show that it was testament to the team that, they talk about it now about bounce back ability and things like that. But, we never got despondent about losing because at the end, I know it builds up over the period of time, but it's only 3 points. If you win the next game, that's 3 out of 6 points. That's 50%. And if we'd done that consistently a bit more, then we would have maybe stayed up.
And during that run of defeats was when you got your first of your 36 goals away at Everton. I know we shared it on social media today, but can you remember that goal well?
I can remember that goal well. I think we were losing. It was either 3-1 or 4-1 at the time. But the ball came across. I think Redders crossed it in, and it got flicked out by one of the centre halves, and it fell to me on the volley nicely. And it was one of those you just lash it and get it on target. And fortunately, there was enough power in it to beat the keeper. But I think I saw it as well today, and I didn't celebrate too much. Obviously, I think the game was gone by then. But always a lovely feeling to get your first goal for the club.
Yeah, it was definitely a subdued celebration, but it was a sign of amazing goals to come as we talk through some of these questions. Yeah. Another memorable moment, or for the wrong reasons really, was the red card against Liverpool. How do you look back on that whole game now, and that decision to send you off?
I don't know if I deserved to get a red card. It was close. My leg went out. He went over it. I feel he was never going to get to the ball. I felt that he wasn't in control of the ball either. So I felt at worst case scenario, it was a yellow card offence. To give me a red card, I thought was very, very harsh. Sitting in the, this is when we had obviously the old changing rooms on the halfway line. I'm sitting in the dressing room with my hands, head in my hands, thinking, oh no, I've let the team down. Liverpool's my team. I supported Liverpool as a kid. So to get sent off against them was gutting. And then I'm sitting there and Morgs walks in. And I'm like, Morgs, can't believe he's taking you off. What's he taking you off for? Surely he needs to strengthen at the back and maybe take one of the forwards off. And he went, I haven't been taken off. I've been sent off. And couldn't believe it. We just couldn't believe it. And then and when I saw his was more farcical than mine. Absolute joke of a decision. And I think we watched the rest of the game from the tunnel. We got changed and watched the rest of the game from the tunnel. And for the boys to get back to 2-2 with a few minutes remaining was fantastic. And Steve McManaman killed us with the third goal. And then I think Shez got sent off just after that for poking two fingers into Paul Ince's eyes. And I think he was going to tell him as well that he was going to get it afterwards as well. So, but that was typical Shez. But yeah, best tackle I ever saw Jan Arge making that game was against the fan. But,
it was a beauty.
It was. It was. I think that was after that game. I don't think we won another game, which obviously meant that we didn't stay up.
And what did that referee performance feel like as a player, and with all the chaos that was ensuing around you at the time?
It felt like everyone was against us. It felt like the big teams get all the decisions, because I guarantee you now, if the shoe had been on the other foot, a Liverpool player wouldn't have been sent off. They would have got a yellow. If it had been their left back, he would have got a yellow card. Morgs' tackle wouldn't even have been a card. It wouldn't even have been a foul. So it was a very much mentality of the big teams always get decisions, which I think, as you saw from the fans' reaction, it was very, very frustrating for us.
And before that game, our form in the league had picked up really well. We were playing some amazing football, getting some good results, and we took that form into the FA Cup. Our FA Cup run that season included your screamer against Spurs. Then you missed the game at Old Trafford, but then you were back on the pitch for the game against Man United in the 3-2. How up for that 3-2 Man United game with the squad? Oh,
massively, because we felt we were, again, we had the decision on lids for the penalty not given. And I think I must have been suspended for the Man U game. But I was doing commentary up in the stand, and even watching it back nowadays, how it wasn't given as a penalty. Mike Riley must have had his eyes closed at that time. He must have been going to Barnard Castle to test his eyesight. But it was a disgrace, absolute disgrace that he never gave it. And the boys were just buzzing for the replay to try and set the record straight. And don't get me wrong, you're playing against Man United, at the time were one of the best teams in Europe. So we knew it was going to be a tall order. But happy Scott Jones Day.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And then it was your pass that set Hendry on his way. When you're stood behind that as it's happening, are you thinking he's going to go with the outside of the right foot?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That was John Hendry down to a T. I think if you watch some of his goals back, the amount of times he hit the ball with the outside of his foot and got power and accuracy in it was ridiculous. Mainly because he didn't have a left foot, which is why he had to use the outside of his right foot. But I slipped the pass in. John obviously made the run, and everyone still to this day probably thinks he would have been offside. I think if they'd had VAR, he might have been offside. But a fantastic finish. And then the most muted celebration ever. If that had been me, Man United was my dad's team. So if that had been me scoring against them, I would have gone absolutely ballistic. But very muted, and it was a fantastic game to be involved in, and it must have been great for supporters to watch that.
Oh, it definitely was. And then looking at the Premier League season as a whole, we had a few memorable moments. But what was your personal highlight of being in the top division?
It has to, for me personally, it's Anfield. It's Liverpool away. We had I think Dave had just got injured, Dave Watson. So Lars Lisa came into the team. Peter Markstead made his debut. Big, tall, 6'5" centre half. Looked a bit gangly on the training ground. We weren't sure, and he produced probably his best ever performance in a Barnsley shirt on his debut. And let's be honest, they had Michael Owen and Karl-Heinz Riedler up front, and for 89 minutes and 58 seconds, we defended for our lives. But we went to Anfield and we kept a clean sheet. I assume everyone knows the story about the night before.
I'm not sure they do.
Oh, right. Okay. I thought Ariane Dazura told this story. We went to the hotel the night. We went and watched Liverpool play midweek on the Tuesday, I think, and they won 4-0. And we all thought, oh my God, we're playing them. We're going to get absolutely slaughtered here. Yeah, that was sort of you didn't think that as a team, but you think, bloody hell, they're really good. This is going to be a tough game. So on the Friday night, when we went over to Liverpool and stayed in the hotel, Danny said, like, dinner at 7 and then downstairs for 8 o'clock. So we went downstairs at 8 o'clock, and normally we'd have a meeting, and we went for a walk instead. And we walked about 500 yards up the road to the nearest pub. Danny said, right, boys, you've got half an hour. So a few of the foreign lads went into the corner of the pub and had an orange juice and an apple juice. There was a couple of us who had a couple of beers each. Not naming any names, but there might have been a couple who had 5 or 6 beers each. But what he'd done was he totally relaxed the team that night. And it was a masterstroke from Danny's point of view. We never done it again, but we just went into the game feeling nice and relaxed. Obviously, I had a nothing to lose mentality, and the rest is history. We won 1-0.
Yeah, it was a phenomenal day. Jumping over to international football for a second, seeing as though you got called up to Wales as a Barnsley player, how did that come about? Because I know you played for England as an under-18 schoolboy. So where did the Wales link come in?
It doesn't. So yeah, I played because I stayed on at school and went into sixth form. I was able to play for England schools, and I went for the trials and everything, and managed to get in. And I sort of played, I think, 8 games for England schools. Played every game. And then when I was at Bristol City, Bobby Gould contacted Joe Jordan, asked him if I'd be interested in playing for Wales. And the reason I qualified for Wales is because my mum and dad were in the forces. So I was born in Germany. So I was born on British soil in a foreign country. So I'm British, but it means I could have played for England, Ireland, Scotland or Wales. Glenn Hoddle had just taken over as the England manager, so there's no chance of me playing for England. So Wales called up and said, would you like to come and play for us? And I said, yeah, absolutely. There was a couple of other players who played through that avenue. I think it's been closed now, but there was a centre-half, Alan Nielsen, who played for Fulham. I think he got into Wales through the same way. And I made my debut at Ninian Park, Cardiff City's old ground, against Jamaica. And it was a 0-0 result, and thoroughly delighted to make my debut. And even to this day, listening to the Welsh national anthem always makes the hairs on the back of my neck stand up when you've got 80,000 people singing it.
And you mentioned Bobby Gould there. He was the one who gave you your debut.
Yeah.
He had an interesting time in charge, shall we say. Was he as controversial and different as the media reports?
Yeah. The players, absolutely, all the older senior players took the mickey out of him every week. But yeah, he was very, very controversial, and wasn't scared to make a decision. But 9 times out of 10, they weren't necessarily the right decisions to make. And
I'm not sure, because I can't pinpoint the exact dates for some of these, but I think you played it against Italy with the whole Robbie Savage. He's not playing, he is playing, throwing the shirt in the bin. What was the Welsh squad making of that at the time?
We had no idea, because it happened sort of late at night on the TV. I didn't actually see it on the interview. And then Robbie got a phone call from Bobby at 5 o'clock in the morning the next day. And there was a press conference at 8 o'clock, and we were all just getting up, ready to go to breakfast and everything. So we didn't know anything about it. And then it all came to light, and apparently he'd thrown Maldini's shirt on the floor in a jokey way. It wasn't any sort of disrespect there, but saying, oh yeah, we're going to do these and everything. And Bobby kicked him out of the squad, but I think he came back in the end. And but their relationship from then on was always quite fractious. So, but yeah, we once went to we played a friendly game against a prison team.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question.
Yeah. So we went and played against a prison team. Giggsy got injured just before the training session, actually, which was quite convenient for him. But it was that was an eye opener, something I'd never done before.
And was Bobby Gold completely different to anybody else that you'd had as manager during your career?
He was just strange in sort of how he would go about things and stuff. But from my point of view, he was great for me. He gave me an opportunity. I think one of my second or third games, we played Denmark away, and he asked me, "Are you okay to play in this game?" And I said yes. He says, "You look a little bit, nervous on the training pitch." I said, "Well, Bobby," I said, "I'm playing next to Ryan Giggs and John Hartson and Chris Coleman and Gary Speed. So I have to train at my absolute maximum because I want to be in the same team as these people." And that's what he wanted to hear. And we beat Denmark 2-1 that night, and I set up both goals. So Craig Bellamy scored, I think, his first goal for his country, and I set a goal up for A.D. Williams. So I just remember him on the pitch after the game, phoning his wife, telling her that they'd done it. And because I think if we hadn't won, I don't think he would have had a job after that day. So, he gave me an opportunity to play international football. So I'll forever be grateful for that.
And back at Oakwell, obviously, we got relegated at Filbert Street. We then saw Danny and Redders leave after relegation. Was there interest in you as well? Were you expecting to move on?
There was rumours. There was rumours around that Danny might come back and take 2 or 3 of the players. My name was mentioned, but obviously nothing ever happened. I don't know whether Danny had an agreement with the club not to do that. Obviously, Redders went on as well. It was a shame that that squad got sort of broken up quite quickly in terms of Danny and Redders leaving, because I only had Danny for a year, but I thoroughly enjoyed my time with him. Got on well with him. Still see him quite regularly now, and sort of on a few golf days and things like that. So we sort of reminisce about the good old days. But and he's obviously gone on to other clubs as well. So it was disappointing that they left. And I again, as I said earlier, I play football for football, and I never went and knocked on doors asking for new contracts and things like this. Just wanted to enjoy my football and play my football. And if that was at Barnsley, fantastic. If someone paid enough money for the club to sell me, then and it was the right move for me, then I would move on somewhere else.
And it was Super John that was chosen to take the reins. And, it's been said by other players that his biggest challenge was going from dressing room comedian to the gaffer in one fell swoop. Were you surprised to see him get the job? And do you think that was true?
Yes and yes. He was a comedian around the dressing room, and it was tough, I think, for him initially to take the reins, because he had the respect of the players from a playing perspective, but not necessarily from a manager's perspective. So it was tough for him, and I felt for him a little bit, but he was probably the cheap and easy option for the club as a senior player in the team. So it was hard work for him, but I don't necessarily think that he got the best out of a really, really good, strong group of players.
Yeah, it was a real Jekyll and Hyde season where we'd be outstanding one game and then we'd look dreadful against Port Vale the next. How did John try and manage those defeats and get our form to improve?
It was hard because, again, sometimes, I don't know, you can't put your finger on it really, because nobody goes out to have a bad game. Every player, you want to be in the team. If you're not in the team, you're working hard to get back in the team. If you're injured, you're working hard to get back in the team. So it was a tough time, and we were just a bit too inconsistent that year. And maybe that came from a slight lack of direction. I don't know. You can't really put a finger on it, but at the end of the day, John picked a team of 11 players to go out on the pitch. People is quick to blame managers and things like that, but you have to look at yourself and you have to look at the players on the pitch. And if we're not performing, then that's down to us more than it is down to him.
But one game where we were outstanding was Huddersfield at home, and I know it's one that you get asked about as much as the penalty at Wembley. But standard question: is that the best goal you've ever scored?
Yeah.
Yeah, easy one. Yeah.
Yeah. What a night. I think we had something like 28 shots on target in the first half. It was ridiculous. We were completely unplayable, and I think even Peter Jackson, the Huddersfield manager, has been on record as saying if they'd come in at 10-0 down at half time, it probably still wouldn't have been a true reflection of the first half performance. I hit the crossbar and the post before I scored. Wardy was on fire. Bruce was on fire. Everything we sort of hit almost went in. And they had a decent team as well. So we were just unplayable that night. Really, really were.
And did you know as soon as you'd hit it, it was going in?
Yeah. You just know. And everyone sort of says, "Oh, did you mean it?" and things like this. Of course you did. The ball came across. We're 5-0 up. And there's about 5 minutes to go before half time. So I'm thinking, I've probably hit one of these or two of these in training before. So let's just hit it. Let's see what happens. I'm either going to hit some old bloke in the back of the stand, or this is going to fly somewhere close to the goal. You couldn't imagine hitting it as perfectly as I did, but it was just one of those. It was my Pele from Escape to Victory moment, and even today, I still sort of. I think it's had something like 30,000 views on YouTube, and I think I've watched it 27,000 times.
Yeah, and you mentioned Ashley Ward here, but that was his last game in a Barnsley shirt. Just tell us, how good was he as a striker, and did you ever have anyone as perfect to aim for in the box again?
He was great. He was, we nicknamed him Tarzan because he was a good-looking sod. But not only that, he was a beast of a player to play against. He was a real handful for defenders, and you could play with one up front and he'd occupy both centre halves. But you always knew that, given half a chance of putting the ball in an area, that he would get on the end of it, and he would bleed, blood and sweat to get there. And we built up. He wasn't there that long with myself, but we built up quite a decent sort of ideology in terms of when I got the ball, I knew where he was going to be. So there's a few goals he scored where he makes runs to the near post and I've whipped it in. He's got his foot there and stuff. And the only other person I could liken to him really was when I was at Bristol City. I played with Sean Gota.
Yeah.
Slightly different style of play, not as physical, Sean, but again, perfect timing of runs, and you knew where he'd be in the box and you knew where to pick him out. But it's a shame Wardy went, but obviously money dictates it in the game at this stage now.
Well, Ward moved on, and actually, before the Huddersfield game, you almost moved on as well. What happened with that Southampton transfer, and what was it that made you stay at Barnsley?
Well, John brought me into the office and basically said, I need to free up some money because I need to bring a couple of players in. You're a saleable asset, and Southampton have offered some money for you with Carlton Palmer as well, coming the other way. We've accepted the offer, go down there and have a medical. And he was almost sort of ushering me out the door, which obviously, you want to be in football. Every footballer wants to be loved, and you want people to say, "Oh, we want you." And he was almost saying to me at the time, "We don't want you." So I went down to Southampton on the Tuesday, and had a medical. Went through the medical, and then sat in a room with the chairman of Southampton and negotiated terms. And the whole reason that it didn't go through, bearing in mind Southampton's 30 miles away from where my parents live, so I was moving back home as well. We couldn't come to an agreement. Basically, with all negotiations, you start really high, they start really low, meet somewhere in the middle, and they weren't prepared to meet in the middle. And it broke down on terms. And, when you look at the money that's in the game now, it's so minimal, it's unbelievable. I think don't get me wrong, footballers and myself included at my time at Barnsley, I earned more money than the man in the street does, sort of thing, doing a good, honest day's work. But it is a short career, and I wanted to try and get from, at this point, I was 27. So this was going to be probably my last big contract. So I needed to make sure that it was right for me. And my family, and we couldn't agree terms. And I went back to Barnsley on the Wednesday. The players had the day off, went in, spoke to John. John then turned around and said, I didn't really want to get rid of you, but I didn't really have a choice because you're an asset. And he said, what's your state of mind like? And I said, absolutely fine. Trained on the Thursday and obviously played on the Friday.
Brilliant. And it was all change again that summer. John had moved on. Harry came in. Your third permanent manager in 3 seasons. How different had all 3 of those been over those 3 years?
Yeah, Harry was a really, really good man manager. He got the best out of his players. I think if you look at that squad that year, he brought in some really good experienced players because he knew the league. He knew what was required to get out of that league. And he obviously had the nucleus of myself, Nick Eden, I think Chris Morgan. Then he brought in people like Kevin Miller, Steve Chettle, Jeff Thomas, Neil Shipley, Robbie van der Laan, people like that who are good, experienced players and knew the league, and that was the difference between him and probably John. He wasn't a very good coach, but he got people into coach who were good coaches. So he brought in Glyn Hodges. He obviously, I think, still had Shirty at that time. So he had people doing that side of it, and he managed really, really well.
And is it frustrating for players when you're at a club and every single year the manager's changing?
Well, I had 5 in 5 years at Barnsley. So, and the frustrating thing was we didn't do too badly for a couple of those years. So, because you're always on it does keep you on your toes because you always feel I've got to perform for this guy. It does give other players a chance who haven't had an opportunity with a previous manager to have a clean slate and come back in. But, it can be frustrating. You like a little bit of stability because you want to work with different managers. You have a different strategy and a different way of playing. So it was, to have to change that every year was tough.
So Harry got us really playing well, real attacking football. He managed to find a role for Craig Hignett, who was scoring for fun. We then went and thumped Blackburn 5-1 in front of a decent-sized Oakwell crowd. And that's when many of us thought, promotion's on here. But then we played Man City and won in front of a full house. Was that the atmosphere that we felt like going back to the Premier League?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that season we had a severe knack of turning draws into wins quite late on in games and turning defeats into draws. So we were consistently picking up points, and we were consistently nicking games when sometimes maybe we didn't deserve to win a game, but we had that ability. I think you had Higgy coming in from the right or playing just in the hole a little bit. I think Chris Barker halfway through the season came in and played left back, and I was pushed more into midfield. And I think I got 13 goals. I was the second top goal scorer that year with 13 goals behind Higgy. I think he got about 18 or 19. So. Obviously, Dave Bassett had a plan in mind, and it worked really well, and he got the best out of his players.
And we had to settle for the playoffs. Birmingham away, 4-0, easy work. How good was that performance to play in?
It was unbelievable, and all credit goes to Dave Bassett because we've been playing 4-4-2 up until that for about 6 games before that, and that day he switched to 3 at the back. He brought in Keith Brown at the back, and Keith had a really, really good game. I think he played in that game, and they just couldn't deal with us. They couldn't deal with the 3 players in midfield. They couldn't deal with Ships and especially Bruce up front. And obviously, I think Bruce's first goal when he powers through the 2 centre halves. But to go 4-0 up in the first leg of a playoff away from home as well, with all due respect, we knew we were already at Wembley from that point. And once Higgy scored the 4th goal, that was it. We knew we were there. We're not going to get beat at home 5-0. And I think we scored the first goal at home as well. I think we lost 2-1 at the second leg at home because we scored the first goal. They needed to score 6. So we knew we were there. And the second game was almost a non-event, really, because we scored that first goal. But that performance was a complete, proper professional performance away from home. Probably never to be bettered, really.
And you mentioned how many goals you scored that season. Heading into that playoff final, do you think you were playing the best football of your career?
Certainly up there. I think from the moment, I think my last season at Bristol City and my first sort of 2.5, 3 years at Barnsley was my best sort of 4-year period of playing football. I'd broken into the Welsh team, so I was playing quite regularly for Wales as well. So, it's where you want to be at football as a footballer. You want to be at the highest level, and And yeah, my game was in a really, really good place at that time. But it always helps when you're playing with decent players.
And heading into that playoff final, it's the one question that everyone wants to ask you about. The penalty in the first half. Can you just talk us through the emotions when you take the ball, you set up for it, and then Richard Wright goes and dives the right way?
I thought I was going to score. Simple as that, really. I was a designated penalty taker for the club. There was a couple of games where I wasn't playing or might have been injured or something like that. So Higgy took a couple of penalties. But if you look back that season, I think it was the season we played Sunderland away as well, and I scored a penalty and we beat them 3-2, their first defeat at Stadium of Light. And I was a designated penalty taker, and I was completely confident in my ability to score that penalty. I always like to say that I didn't miss it, he saved it. It did him no harm. He got a £6 million move to Arsenal about a month later. But listen, it's one of those things. Did I deliberately mean to miss it? Of course I didn't. It would have put us 2-1 up in the game. Would the game be different? Potentially, yes. On the day, they were the better team. They played better than us throughout the game, and maybe it wasn't just meant to be. But I don't regret taking it. I salute and applaud any player that's prepared to stand up and take a penalty, whether it's in front of 10 people or it's 80,000 people. And it's what defines you as a player. And fortunately for me, although I was pretty inconsolable after the game, fortunately about 3 or 4 days later, we had a friendly game for Wales in Portugal. And I played against Luis Figo 4 days later. So that sort of took my mind off of it. But obviously it was a very, very sad day for me and a sad day for the club. But there's nothing I can do about it now. It obviously goes down in history. But if I could go back in time, I would go back to the 35th minute at Wembley Stadium in that year, and I would retake that penalty.
I wish we could. You talk about being inconsolable. How down were you at half time? With it being so close to half time, the penalty?
I was focused on the game, so it obviously disappointed that I missed it, but I was fine for the second half. Obviously, the game when it went. After the game, when they went up to get their trophy, it's probably the only time I don't know if there's ever a clip or anything, but I'm sitting on the pitch with my back to where they're going up to get the trophy, and it's the only time I've ever cried on a football pitch. So I was devastated at the end of the game, but what can I do? It's happened. I can't go, oh, ref, can I take that again? I missed it. You don't get a second chance. So I saw the chairman afterwards, and I apologised to the chairman, and his response was, "Don't worry, son. It's only cost the club 150 million quid." That's what he said to me. So it was partly in jest, but I think partly he was probably hurting just as much as I was, if not a little bit more, maybe.
And we had Craig Ignat on a few weeks ago, and he told us how, to your point earlier about being a saleable asset, we just needed to cash in that summer, and he had to go. Were you fully expecting to leave as well?
Not necessarily, because I'd signed, when I initially joined the club in 97, I signed a 3-year contract. And then after the Huddersfield game, I signed a new contract. I signed a 3-year contract, a new one. So I had no reason to think that I would be moved on. I don't know if anyone came in for me or anything like that, but Higgy was obviously getting all the headlines at the club. Predominantly I was a left back, and left backs are not necessarily those massive saleable assets. It's people who score goals and maybe goalkeepers and stuff like that. But no, I was content and happy to stay at the club. I thought Dave Bassett would be staying on, and we obviously didn't do it that year. I thought we'd have a great chance of doing it the following season.
And you talk about that following season. So the next couple of years were a bit challenging for Barnsley, to say the least. Bassett had gone by Christmas that following year. Nigel Spackman had come in. What was Nigel like as a manager, and why do you think things didn't work out for him while he was here?
Nigel was a really, really nice fella. But Barnsley was not the right job for him at that time, in my opinion. And when you've got a manager come in who's trying to get Chris Morgan to play out from the back, Baresi-esque, it's not going to happen. And he was radical in his thinking, and he was probably ahead of his time, because what Pep Guardiola is doing nowadays with people like John Stones and stuff like that, playing out from the back, is fantastic. Nigel tried to do that in sort of 2000, 2001, and we didn't have the players to do it. With no disrespect to Chris Morgan, Chris Morgan was a no-nonsense centre-half who could head it, who could clear the ball, and he could tackle people, and he read the game really well. He improved with the ball as he got older and better, but and obviously I've named Chris Morgan as one player. He tried to get us to play in a way which we didn't have the players that are able to do that, and quite a few of the senior players did leave that year, and he brought in quite a few younger players who, although went on to have good careers, weren't ready to play at that level of football, unfortunately, and that's why we struggled a little bit that season.
And he obviously then moved on, and Steve Parkin came in, and you talk about 5 managers in 5 years. What was Steve Parkin like, trying to fight the fire of keeping us up and stopping the relegation?
Could not stand the guy. With all due respect, he came in, first couple of games, effing and blinding. We're going to effing do this, effing do that. And everyone was like, oh, right, okay. And you get a reaction from players. So I think his first 6, 7, 8 games, we went unbeaten. I think we only won 2 or 3. And we drew
a lot of draws.
Yeah, a lot of draws. But once you've heard that 7 or 8 times, it doesn't work. Sometimes, Mark Hughes was a very, very quiet manager for Wales. But when he raised his voice, everyone listened. Because Steve Parkin came in and started raising his voice from minute 1, everyone was like, oh. But once you have that initial reaction, it doesn't work from there on in. And it was too big a job for him. He'd obviously had success at Rochdale doing that, but Barnsley was too big a job for the guy, and the less said about his assistant, the better.
Oh, I've forgotten who his assistant was.
Tony Ford.
Oh my God, yeah.
Played for Grimsby for years, made 1,000 games. Again, just an absolute snake. Couldn't trust the guy. Would never even say hello to you as you walk past him in the hallway, and he was the assistant manager. I can say this now, 20 years later, but at the time you thought, what's this fella on? But both of them completely out of their depth, and obviously resulted in a very, very poor season that year.
And look, with this next question, I'm not looking to criticise any of the players from that Spackman, Hodges, Parkin season, but was it hard for you and Morgs as Premier League Wembley players to see what was happening to the club on the pitch, and the quality was just dropped to a level where we couldn't stay in the league?
Exactly. You look around, and I was coming towards the end of my contract with Steve Parkin. I think there was myself, Kevin Miller, and Steve Chettle, and some of the teams that were picked were questionable at best. And I hate to say it, but we went to Man City away, and it's probably one of the few times ever in my life he took 17 players, and obviously he only named 16, and I was named as the 17th player, so I didn't get stripped. It's the only time in my career that I've ever wanted the team to lose. And I didn't want the players to lose, I wanted him to lose, and we got beat 5-1.
Yeah.
And I actually went in, saw him after that, and said, if you don't play your best players, that's what happens. But by then the damage was done anyway. I was surplus to requirements at that point, and so was Steve Chettle, so was Kevin Miller, and we were all basically told, just after the team relegation was confirmed, he basically came up to us and said, you can leave now with a payoff, we'll pay up the rest of your contracts, or you can stay, but we're doing a mini pre-season, and I'll just run you into the ground. So obviously the 3 of us all took payoffs, and we all left at that point, which is really sad, because I know the money ran out then and the Bosman ruling came in, but I was happy to stay I was happy. If he'd been there, I probably would have left. But if he'd gone, then I was happy to stay at the club, even if it meant taking a pay cut. But that was never, ever offered to me. And I'm actually very good friends. The sponsor was Aura. One of the directors was called Malcolm Hanson, and I've known Malcolm now obviously since my time at Barnsley, and I played golf with him a few times. And he told me that Steve Parkin told him he offered me a contract and I refused it, and that was never the case. I was never offered a contract after that season. And as I said, I would have taken less money to stay at the club.
And is that probably the spell in your career that you look back on the least favourably?
Yeah, that last season, and then I joined Grimsby for 2 years. I still stayed living in around the edge of Barnsley, so it was an hour and 45-minute drive to Grimsby every day. That 2 years was not enjoyable at all. I had just over probably 3.5 really, really brilliant years at Barnsley. The last year and a half was hard. It was really, really hard because of the direction the club had gone in, really, where we were selling our best players and we were trying to bring players in that weren't up to the standard that the club had been at for the last 3 years.
And you said right at the start of this that Glenn Hoddle was in your bottom two of coaches. Is Steve Parkin, is he the other one, or is there someone else?
He's so far down there. He's in a different stratosphere to everyone else. He really is.
So who else is down there with Glenn Hoddle?
No, that's what I mean. Steve
that's
Parkin
it. Yeah.
is right up there. Then there's Glenn Hoddle a little bit lower, and then the rest are a bit further down.
I've got you. And then who's in the top two with Glenn Hoddle in terms of coaching players?
Coaching. So believe it or not, Glenn Hoddle's right-hand man when he was the England manager was John Gorham, and he was at Bristol City. And what a lovely fella he was. I was quite fortunate. I had him at Bristol City. At Chelsea for a little while, I had Don Howe.
Yeah.
So again, he was with Terry Venables at Euro 96. So again, a fantastic coach. He wasn't at Chelsea for very long. I think it was about a year, but immense knowledge of the game, and he helped. The biggest help in my early years was a guy called Eddie Nishvesky, who's followed Mark Hughes around.
That's it, yeah.
So he was a reserve team manager at Chelsea when I first joined Chelsea, and he would spend probably half an hour to an hour after training with me running through drills and stuff, improving my game, improving my crossing, my passing, things like that. So he'll be up there as well.
And look, 4 more quick questions if we can squeeze them in. Can't not ask about this, but what was it like putting yourself at the top of all the most bizarre injury lists with the cruciate and the puppy?
I'm never going to live that down, am I? So no, I was already. It wasn't actually a cruciate; it was my ankle. So that's always been sort of wrongly accused. But we had one dog, and I just bought a new one, and I was actually injured at the time with a bad ankle. Just coming back, I've been out for about 3 weeks, and then as I walked around the corner, he peed on the floor, and I slipped in it, and done my ankle again. So I told John Hendry, who was the manager at the time, in confidence in his office on a Tuesday, said, please don't share this with anyone else. And he said, yeah, no, my word is my bond. No one will know about it. It was in the Chronicle on the Friday. It was in the Sun newspaper on the Monday. And then about 3 months later, I'm sitting at home watching A Question of Sport. And Sue Barker asked the question, Andy Cole, yeah, that was Darren Barnard at Barnsley who slipped on dog pee. It was a question on Question of Sport. Couldn't believe it, all inside 3 months. So cheers, John, for that. I try to keep it a secret. And now I'm in the top 10 stupidest injuries of all time.
That probably goes back to the stepping up from the dressing room comedian to the manager.
That's it. Yeah, I just don't think he could contain himself, and he had to share it with somebody. So,
and then a more serious one. Just how long would you spend practicing set pieces on the training pitch to get such a good left foot free kick?
I spent hours, and it was when I became a pro, but it's also from the age of about 8 onwards. My dad would spend hours with me practicing. Taking penalties, and to say we're quite a competitive family would be an understatement. So he wouldn't let me win. It was only until I was good enough that I was able to beat him. So practice. I remember one year at Christmas, a box was there, and I'm thinking, oh, brand new pair of football boots. And he opened the box up, and it was a set of trainers actually, but a brand new right foot trainer, and he put a slipper in for my left foot. And I said, what have you done that for? And he said, well, the only way you're going to become a professional footballer is if you practice and got 2 good feet. So you need to practice with your right foot, which means you don't use your left foot. But he instilled all the basics into me to work. And what I say to any young player nowadays is the 3 most important words in football are practice, practice, practice. You've got to practice. If you don't practice, then you're not going to get any better. And you don't just practice weaknesses, practice strengths as well. So, taking a free kick is not something that happens on a whim. It's something that you have to practice, and hours upon hours are spent on the training field.
Sound advice. And then one of the other questions that came in was, which winger gave you the most difficult time and was a nightmare to play against?
Sure. For someone who wasn't known for their speed, I never really got done by wingers. The worst experience I had was actually playing for Wales. We played Denmark at Anfield, and we lost 2-0, but I played against Jasper Gronkia, who was at Chelsea, and he was rapid. He was proper rapid. So he was probably the one player who, in the first half, he tormented me and got past me loads of times. And it was only until the second half when I scraped my studs down the back of his Achilles and said, do that again, and I'm going to do you, that he actually stopped doing it. So I just wish I'd done that in the first 10 minutes of the game and not the second half of the game.
And then final question is, funniest pre-Watershed moment as a Barnsley player?
Well,
so it can't include Shez because it's pre-Watershed.
Well, that's the thing, you see. Most of the things happened with Shez. I don't know. It's a tough one, really. I think Dave Bassett took us to Finland pre-season, and his motto was, if you're going to go out, everyone goes out. So we were like, shall we go out? Shall we not go out? And we decided, yeah, we're going to go out. So it's about 8 o'clock on the first evening. He said, if you go out, I don't care if you go out, but if you're not in the training ground by 10 o'clock the next morning, you're going to get fined. So we've all gone out. First bar we've gone into, who's the first person we see? Dave Bassett. He's standing at the bar. All right, boys, all this. So we're having a good time and everything. We've had a few drinks and stuff. Some of the boys stayed out quite late. Next morning, we're down for breakfast at 9 o'clock. Everyone's looking around. Who's here? Everyone's here. Everyone's here. Yeah. Where's Scott Jones? Oh, he's not here. So it got to about 9:30. Where's Scott Jones? Don't know. 9:45. The driveway for the hotel was about 400 yards long. And in the distance, you can see this little figure coming towards you. And as we've looked up, someone's gone, is that Scott? He's on a kid's tricycle. I'm talking about a 5-year-old kid's tricycle, cycling up the driveway at 9:45 in the morning because he didn't want to be late for training. One of the funniest things I've ever seen. But he managed to get changed and get out on the training ground before 10 o'clock, so he didn't get fined. But I don't know where he was. Didn't want to ask him, but he was there on time. So that's probably one of the funniest things I've seen.
That's a brilliant story. Look, Dazza, thanks a lot for that. That was amazing. We really could have dived into some of those seasons a lot more, but appreciate your time, honesty, and obviously the passion for those 5 seasons at Barnsley.
Cheers. Thank you. I really enjoyed my time there and absolutely loved it.
Look, final words from me to remind you that we're adopting a Samba vibe on Thursday at 7 o'clock with Dennis Souza, supplemented by some written answers over email from Anderson De Silva, who got in touch with us from Uruguay. Neil Thompson then joins us on Tuesday, 2nd of June, to talk about his impact at Oakwell in getting us to the Premier League. He might have played some games for us in the Premier League if we hadn't have signed a left wing back from Bristol City.
Yes, sorry, Tom, for taking your place.
Look, Darren, thanks once more, and look forward to hearing you on the iFollow comms and when we're playing down south, and all the best for the future.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. Cheers.
Look, good night, everyone. Stay safe. We'll see you on Thursday with Dennis Souza.